I'm Ratna Bhushan, a friend motivator and guide to IAS aspirant, international motivational speaker, leadership trainer, CEO coach, political strategist, and policy advisor. Welcome to ASG. ASG believe in quality, commitment, and success. The stars in the sky. The stars in the sky. There can be only one sun at a time. Never obscure the sunlight. Never obscure the sunlight or rival the sun's brilliance. Rather fade into the sky and find ways to heighten the master star's intensity. Avoid outshining the master. All superiority is odious, but the superiority of a subject over his prince is not only stupid, it is a fatal. This is a lesson that the stars in the sky teach us. They may be related to the sun and just as brilliant, but they never appear in her company. This fact I have taken from the book The 48 Laws of Power, written by Robert Greene. So the most important news of today's are source the Hindu newspaper. Sri Lanka revisiting draft 20th amendment. Prime Minister Rajapaksa appoints a 9-member committee to study the proposed amendment. The Sri Lankan government is revisiting the draft 20th amendment of the constitution gazetted earlier this month in the light of the public concern, according to government sources. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa on Saturday appointed a 9-member committee chaired by G.L. Paris, a cabinet minister and former professor of law, has studied the proposed amendment. The newly drafted 20th amendment envisages enhancing presidential powers along with immunity, while significantly reducing the prime minister's role and powers, according to sources familiar with the discussion within the government. The committee has taken task with reviewing the draft amendment in the light of the public concern. Depending on the findings of its committee, the government may gazette a revised draft of the proposed amendment. The source, who did not wish to be named, told the Hindu on Monday. It follows the ruling Rajapaksa brothers' elections place to repeal President's 19th Amendment introduced by the former government in 2015 that imposed curbs on presidential power while empowering Parliament and independent commission. The next important news is Yoshihide Suga set to become Japan PM. Ruling Liberal Democratic Party elected him as its leader. Parliamentary vote likely on Wednesday. Japan's chief cabinet secretary Yoshihide Suga is set to become the country's next prime minister after the ruling party on Monday elected him successor to ongoing leader Shinzo Abe. Mr. Suga easily won the vote, taking 377 of 534 valid votes cast by Liberal Democratic Party (LDP) lawmakers and regional representatives, significantly ahead of its two rivals. Given his party legislative majority, he is expected to win a parliamentary vote on Wednesday and become Prime Minister, succeeded Mr. Abe, who is significant for health region. The next important news is Truth Fund. Truth Fund to provide legal aid in fight for the free speech. It will amplify the voices of those facing criminal charges. With hundreds of the people wanting support, Advocate Prashant Bhushan by symbolically contributing ₹1 or more towards his fine in the contempt of court case in the Supreme Court, a fund has been set up to use the money to help others fighting for the free speech. The Satyamev Jayate or the Truth Fund will be used to provide legal support and amplify the voices of those facing criminal charges for their standing by their conscience and speaking truth, said activist Anjali Bharadwaj at a webinar organized by Swaraj Abhiyan and the Campaign for Judicial Accountability and Reforms on Freedom of Speech and the Judiciary. Participating in the discussion, retired Supreme Court Judge Madan Lokho said the state is using an iron hand to curb the free speech. Suddenly you have a lot of cases charging people with sedition. Common citizens who say something are charged with the sedition. Already 70 cases of sedition this year, Justice Lockwood said. He said the arbitrary use of the preventive detention, the increase in the sedition charges, the labeling of opinion as a fake news, and the news misreading the statements such as Mr. Bhushan's tweets have already resulted in the curbing of the free speech in the unconstitutional way. Justice Lockwood noted that there were 3.4 crore cases pending in the district courts and a crisis of vacancies in the judiciary. The courts need to introspect, our justice system is in danger of the complete collapse, he asserted. N. Ram, director of the Hindu group of the publication, said the Prashant Bhushan case had instilled a stimulating effect on free speech and expression. The contempt judgment against Mr. Bhushan was of 5 years. One and contained a strong language. The punishment ₹1 was certainly incongruous, something very odd. There was no real substitution for this kind of punishment. The next most important news is Bhartiyar, the charioteer of the wisdom. Subramanyam Bharti's Janartham shows how he was able to transcend a narrow nationalist vision. Subramanyam Bharti status 1882 and 1921 as the preeminent cultural figure of the modern Tamil Nadu rests primarily on his poetry. Unfortunately, the focus on his poetry has translated into the virtual neglect of his prose writings. As a working journalist, Bharti necessarily employed prose to communicate, and his writings in Swadesh Samitran and India made an important contribution to Tamil political vocabulary. He wrote stories, commentaries, and also pioneer of column writing in Tamil. Active participation in the day-to-day politics of nationalist movement, notwithstanding, Bharti never lost sight of the future, the dream of how a free India should look. Aspect of the dream form part of the fantasy story. Janartham, the chariot of the wisdom. Janartham, the chariot of the wisdom. Janartham, the chariot of the wisdom. Janartham, the chariot, was stopped in its tracks as the author went to the exile to French-ruled Pondicherry to escape the British police. In February the next year, Janartham was resumed but was just suspended after the 2 further instances, with the Bharti promising his reader that it would soon appear in the full book. But when Janartham did come out in the January 1910, it was called Part 1. Janartham was never completed and ended up as one of the Bharti's several unfinished writing projects. The next news is urban employment as the focal point. Urban employment as the focal point. Given the structure of economy and demographic profile, the vulnerabilities of the informal jobs must be addressed. The contractions of economy issues raises concern on the employment situation as the striking sectors are those that create the maximum new jobs, while the Garib Kalyan Rozgar Abhiyan launched in June aimed to provide livelihood opportunity in rural India could be immediate relief. 50,000 crore employment scheme cannot be a substitute for a decent urban jobs. Given the structure of economy and demographic profile, it is important to focus on reducing the vulnerabilities of the urban informal jobs in the long run. Economy and employment. Recent data of the contractions of the economy raises concern on the employment situation in India. The shrinking sector that have been affected the most: construction 50%, trade, hotels and other services -40%, manufacturing -39%, mining 23%, are those that create a maximum new jobs in the economy. In a scenario where each of these sectors is contracting so sharply, it would lead to either a growing number of people losing jobs or failing to get one or even both. That is, there is a possibility of the declining in employment and subsequent rise in employment. This is sharp contraction is to be light in India, having witnessed a wave of massive reverse migration during the early phase of the lockdown, while millions of workers returning to their homes stayed due to a loss of livelihood. It is doubtful as to when and whether they will return to their places of work, and it will not be unreasonable to assume the majority of the workers might not go back in the near future. And the last most, this is the editorial of the Hindu newspaper. India's great silence is the loudest sound. India's great silence is the loudest sound. Citizens must unceasingly demand that they enable to know the facts of the crisis authoritatively. Ghost of the Spanish flu in 1918 to 1920. The four great recessions 1958, 1966, 1973, 1980, 1980. and the Sino-Indian conflict 1962 have come together as one torment to plague India, and no one really knows how to handle this multiple-headed sprite. In fact, no one really knows quite what it really is. No reasoned explanations. We have no one in the public office telling us what is what, convincingly. Authoritatively on the epidemic, we know that India has its virologist T. Jacob John Tellus surpassed Brazil and the United States to own the sad distinctions of having the fastest growing novel coronavirus caseload in the world, and that India has a broken world records in the daily new case total. But there is so much we need to know about the details and know about what authoritative from official government survey says. Now, the few things from the M. Lakshmikant Polity Book Century State Relation. The Constitution of India, being federal in structure, divides all power, legislative, executive, and financial, between the center and the state. However, there is no division of the judicial power. The Constitution has established an integrated judicial system to enforce both the central laws as well as state laws. Though the center and the states are supreme in their respective fields, maximum harmony and coordination between them is essential in the effective cooperation of the federal system, and the Constitution contains elaborate provision to regulate the various dimensions of the relative relation between the center and the state. The center-state relation can be studied under three heads. Number one, legislative relation, legislative relation, legislative relation, administrative relation, financial relation, legislative relation, administrative relation, and financial relation. Thank you so much.